Arc 7, The Land of the Wolves. Chapter 29, To Each Their Stance. Securing the 9 divine generals, that was the victory condition for reclaiming the imperial throne. With the condition for victory presented, along with the names and titles of those necessary, the 9 divine generals, Subaru could tell from experience that the air in the room had become tense. Of course, the names of the 9 divine generals, which would be familiar to people in the Empire, were all novel to Subaru. Subaru, if this were a manga or an anime, it would have been an exciting development to see all the names of the generals revealed at once. However, as this was something that was actually happening to him, the development was one he could not be openly pleased about. As Abel mentioned the name and corresponding title of each of the 9 divine generals, Subaru could imagine how troublesome each one of them would be, with each of them sounding effective in how they were talked up. As Arakia's nickname, Spirit Eater, corresponded with a special trait of hers, Subaru could imagine that the others' aliases were somewhat related to their abilities or fighting methods. Subaru, the only ones whose names give me a clear image of their abilities would be the Master of Enchanted Items and the Flying Dragon General? The 2 names he pointed out were probably both derived from the way they fought and the tools they used. The other nicknames were probably inspired by their appearance or anecdotes of their exploits. In China's Romance of the Three Kingdoms and the Water Margin both, characters would often take on aliases for such reasons. Come to think of it, one could say that those stories were also about taking a country. Unfortunately, Subaru was not very familiar with them, having only a cursory knowledge of their contents. Subaru, this is no time to be spacing out. Well, I've heard that securing the 9 divine generals is the condition for victory, but there are some things I want to ask you. Abel, what? Is there any room for doubt? Abel raised one eyebrow and placed his hand on top of the map on the table as Subaru recovered from his initial shock. If he thought that he had explained everything with that, he would be the ultimate example of a clever man short of words. Compared to the other people here, Zikr and the others, not to mention the people of Shudrak, Subaru had far less information about the Valakian Empire. Subaru, so there's clearly room for me to doubt. If you keep skipping explanations because you yourself know what you're talking about, the people around you won't know what you're thinking about exactly. Abel, I shall take that as advice and ignore it. State your question. Subaru, keep that ignoring bit to yourself. Subaru sighed as Abel crossed his arms and responded arrogantly. Then, having resigned himself to the attention gathering around him, he said, ready, as he held up 4 fingers on one hand and 5 fingers on the other. Subaru, there are 9 divine generals, but thankfully that's an odd number, so it's easy to understand that it comes down to a battle of numbers. But the ones who favor us are unaccounted for, and, right now, Arakia and this Chisha guy are most definitely enemies. We're already way outnumbered. They supposedly needed to secure no less than 5, but their enemy already held 2 of the 9 divine generals under them. In addition, it was unclear whether the person who had aided Abel, Gaz, was alive or dead. So there was a high chance that one of the cards they could play had been permanently removed from play. Subaru, the situation becomes bleaker by the minute. It's good that the victory condition's clear, but is it actually realistic to persuade 5 of the 9 divine generals? Al, hey bro, I think you're still underestimating the Emperor too much. I said it earlier, but he's already won the Imperial selection ceremony. They can't just flat out refuse his request to talk. As long as they don't turn him away at the front door. Priscilla, then we shall get the opportunity to behead those who oppose us at the same time. Subaru, we need to get them on our side. Ael's remarks, posing as an attempt to dissolve Subaru's doubts, were incinerated by the extreme comment of his mistress, of all people. They were talking about how to get the 9 divine generals on their side, but devising a way to kill the 9 divine generals who would not be on their side would be putting carriage before the ground dragon. Abel, but the clown in the iron helmet there is correct. In fact, if I state I want to meet them, there would be no general who would refuse. The problem is what happens after we meet. Al, is the clown in the iron helmet me? Subaru, there's no one else with an iron helmet. If you have a problem with him treating you like a clown, you can start with a petition to Priscilla. After silencing Al's teasing, Subaru returned to the topic at hand. Subaru, in the first place, I don't understand the system of the 9 divine generals. I've always imagined them as 9 generals who report directly to the Emperor, but doesn't that mean they're all in the imperial capital? Priscilla, generals of the first class are the cornerstone of this nation. Consider how uselessly vast the empire is. Even though the imperial capital lies in the center of the country, how can they move quickly in an emergency if they all sojourn in the imperial capital? Zikr, yes. Although it has been dramatically reduced during His Excellency's reign, there is still no end to the fires of civil unrest that smolder in the empire. Having a firm foothold in the imperial capital is not enough to guarantee the safeguarding of the empire. Subaru, in other words, the 9 divine generals in question are scattered all over, outside the imperial capital? As Priscilla and Zicker supplemented information, Subaru put his hand on his chin in understanding. Following a familiar example, Roswell had also been bestowed with the grandiose title of Margrave of the Western Lands in the Kingdom of Lagunica, and was obligated to act quickly in the kingdom's time of need. Of course, he had the permission to set up a private army in his territory for that purpose. However, in Roswell's case, it seemed that his individual strength was greater than that of a poorly organized army. Just by raining down fireballs while flying in the sky, he would be able to completely defeat most opponents. Subaru, when you think about it, that guy is also quite the cheat unit. I'm a little curious to see where he stands compared to the 9 divine generals. Kuna, I don't know, but I think we're getting off track here, Natsuki. Subaru, my bad. Anyway, I know now that the 9 divine generals are scattered across the country. If that's the case, am I correct in understanding that not all of them were involved in the coup d'état in the imperial capital? Abel, from what I have seen, and from a practical standpoint, I would say so. Abel nodded his head to Subaru in confirmation. To be honest, Subaru was unsure about Abel's assessment, as he had just been found to be quite unpopular, but the fact that no one around him had pointed it out suggested that it was something that could be accepted for the time being. Anyway, the good news was that not all the 9 divine generals had become enemies. The victory condition that the more 9 divine generals they secured, the more likely they were to win this battle, made sense. Other than that, if there was one thing that Subaru had doubts about, it was. Subaru, sorry for asking so many questions, but I got an additional question. If the 9 divine generals are simply ordered by strength, then priority should be given to the ones of the highest rank, correct? Abel, yes, that perception is correct. Subaru, then the one strong enough to be on par with Reinhardt is Cecilus, right? It's common sense that we go for that person, wouldn't he be enough? One among the 4 strongest human beings, those who had made a name for themselves in the 4 great countries. If Cecilus, who had been mentioned to be amongst these 4, was a person considered to be on par with Reinhardt, then it would be very much as if the outcome of the battle would be decided by that person alone. In fact, that Reinhardt could win even if he fought everyone in the kingdom, was an extraordinary expectation and view that had sprouted in Subaru. So, naturally, he held such sort of presupposition for Cecilus, who was Reinhardt's equal. However, Abel, it is true that if we secure that person, all the problems of our strength shall be solved in one move. Subaru, if that's the case, why do you look so bitter? Frowning, Abel's expression was poor as he answered Subaru's question. While Subaru's expectations did not appear to be far off, there was no improvement on his gloomy expression. Abel revealed the reason for this with a small exhale. Abel, the reason why securing the 9 divine generals is a condition for victory, is because generals and soldiers alike shall follow their military orders. The more 9 divine generals one possesses under their banner, the more troops shall join your forces. Do you understand? Subaru? Yes, I understand. That's why I'm saying we should aim to have the strongest guy on our side. Or is it that him being called the Empire's strongest is not true? Abel, no, there is no question that he is the strongest in the Empire. However, there is a problem. Subaru, a problem? Abel, he is not very popular. Subaru stopped thinking for a while, due to the words that had been uttered in pent-up frustration. The words he was told slowly penetrated his brain, as he wondered what the problem was. Lack of popularity, that information was digested correctly. Subaru, should you be saying that? Abel, it is factual. His rank is that of the first, amongst the generals of the first class of the Empire, but he holds no authority. Even if I were to give him the power, he would be incapable of doing anything with it. The only thing he can do is to cut people down. Subaru, you can't put someone like that in the position of army general. Al, easy, calm down, bro. That's just the way of the Empire, you know? With that criticism of Cecilus being spoken by Abel, Subaru was held back by Al. With his one arm around Subaru, Al tilted his head to look at Abel and said, Al, actually, you've given him nothing but the title of first. Maybe you should have tried giving him the authority he deserves for his position. Maybe he's been taken advantage of by someone who was sweet-talking him, you know? Abel, of course, that person being utilized by anyone other than me is not within my wishes. If there were such a danger, I would have disposed of him earlier. Subaru, but you were in the forest, alone and helpless. Even if he said that he was holding the reins, if the actual circumstances differed, then he was just bragging. In the first place, could the idea that the person labeled as the strongest in the Empire was unable to gather popularity in the Valachian Empire, dedicated to this strength as it was, be taken seriously? Subaru, what about that part, Zicker-san? Zicker, me, huh? Subaru, yeah. As a general of the Empire, I'd like to hear your honest opinion. What do you think of General First Class Cecilus? Being probed for information, Zicker spoke right then, and crossed his arms briefly in thought. Then, nodding several times at the expectant gaze in Subaru's eyes. Zicker, first of all, there is no doubt that Cecilus Dano is the cornerstone of our national defense and the symbol of the strength of the Valachian Empire. The Empire's people are also the embodiment of its strength and its way of being. Subaru, oh, that sounds good? So, what is it, then? Zicker, as a person he is carefree, friendly, and has a sunny and pleasant demeanor towards anyone. Overall. Subaru, overall. Zicker, many of the troops fear Cecilus Dano to be an incomprehensible monster and impossible to communicate with on a deeper level. I believe His Excellency is correct in his assessment. Subaru, your assessment has taken a sharp turn, hasn't it? Zicker, who had only painted the picture of a good person up to this point, chose his words quite carefully in his evaluation. Some people would think that he was just trying to be considerate of Abel, the emperor, but the wrinkles between his eyebrows showed that he was putting in a lot of effort, so he probably told the truth. In other words, Priscilla, it would be unacceptably reckless to even attempt to suppress the first of the 9 divine generals with the intent to tip the scales in a single swoop. I cannot comprehend how you would come up with a suitable idea, even if your head was not filled with foolish ruminations. Subaru, shut up. Don't blame me for his lack of popularity. If the emperor and the generals aren't popular, it's no wonder a coup d'etat was called. Abel, how many times are you going to repeat this? Do not think that your disrespect shall be overlooked forever. Receiving sharp glares from Priscilla and Abel respectively, Subaru stuck out his tongue at them. However, it was true that his plan had been shattered with ease. If securing the 9 divine generals was equivalent to securing battle numbers, then securing those who were not popular possessed no merit whatsoever. Subaru, in fact, if they're not popular, can we leave them alone? Abel, that is also a problem. That person has the ability to change the course of the war all by his lonesome, depending on the situation. Even if we are capable of securing all of the remaining divine generals, there is a good chance that he alone could take my head. Subaru, that's a hard guy to handle. He's an absurd hindrance, isn't he? Rushing to secure him was not warranted, but he was too dangerous of a bomb to leave unattended. It was only now, in a foreign land far away from home, that Subaru realized how much of a good asset Reinhardt was, whose ability and humanity were guaranteed. Perhaps if he were called out loud enough, he would rush to the neighboring country? Priscilla, let me tell you something, foolish commoner. If you are contemplating summoning the Sword Saint, he cannot cross borders because of the non-aggression pact. It would be wise not to get your hopes up. Subaru, don't read people's minds. I'm not considering it for real. Relying on them only when I'm in trouble isn't the proper way to treat a friend. If used for convenience, just because he could call upon him and have him rush to his side, it would not really be something he could call a friendship. If the situation were to become really, really bad, he would not be able to say the same. However, till that moment arrived, Subaru was resolved to keep his morals intact. Priscilla, so? Foolish commoner being treated as Abel's military strategist, have you run out of inquiries? Subaru, I haven't run out of questions yet, and first of all I'm not a military strategist. Subaru replied, frowning as Priscilla took a dig at his position. Then, just as he was about to move on to the next topic of the meeting. Miss Natsuki and Village Chief Kuan. Excuse me. At the same time a cheerful voice resounded, the door was opened, and a new person appeared in the conference hall with vigor. The one who had arrived was Flop, a beautiful man clad in blue, his long golden hair swaying briskly. Flop was supposed to be tending to the injured on the upper floor where the damage of Arakia's rampage remained. While becoming the focus of all eyes in the room, he looked at Subaru and Abel, and nodded, saying there you are. Flop's figure was stained all over with blood, accentuating the horror of the makeshift field hospital. But the fact that he showed up here meant that. Subaru, Flop-san, how's everyone's treatment? Flop, we just wrap things up for now, From the looks of it, you're in the mood for husband Kuan instead of Miss Natsuki? If so, I'll revert to calling you husband Kuan. Subaru, well, either is fine. But, yeah, things are getting wrapped up. While receiving Flop's rather oblique words of consideration, Subaru reflected with simultaneous relief and anxiety upon hearing that the healing process had come to a close. The relief was simply because of the fact that the aid of the injured had finished. The anxiety was more for the fact that he would hear of the results from the healing mission. The goal of the bloodless siege had already failed. 7 guards had fallen victim in Arakia's extraction. The only question now was whether any of the wounded would join them. Flop, there have been no deaths, husband Kuan. Subaru, Flop, it was a tough situation for all of us, though. But I think it was thanks to the efforts of wife-san and niece-chan. The promptness of Miss Terita and Miss Utakata as well. Of course, my sister and I had to work hard, too. Having read his inner feelings from Subaru's complexion, Flop gave him the answer first. Flop boasted about his contributions while pointing at himself, looking rather manly. The answer he had given was concise, so Subaru needed only the time of a heartbeat to digest the information. However, after his understanding deepened a heartbeat later, a great big sigh escaped him. Subaru, no deaths, hook. Flop, yeah, it's a sign that everyone did their best to stay alive. As for me, if it weren't for my sister protecting me, I would have hit my head and died. Haha, I'm no match for my sister. Subaru, yeah, that's true. I'm no match for Medium-san either. Flop laughed vivaciously while in front of him, whereas Subaru cast his eyes downward and shook his shoulders. Without exaggeration, without jesting, he was completely of the same opinion. If Medium or anyone else for that matter were not present there, this report would never have been heard. There were lives that had been lost. But there were also lives that had not been lost. The emotions that brought to his heart were great. Abel, merchant, what happened to that practitioner of the healing arts? Despite Subaru's excitement, Abel forced himself into the conversation with an indifferent tone. Practitioner of the healing arts, Subaru raised an eyebrow at the unfamiliar sound, and Flop put his finger to his lips. Practitioner, he murmured as he gave it some consideration. Flop, is that? You're talking about husband Kuen's wife-san? Abel, who else is there? Did you believe there was anyone else in that place who could cast healing magic besides that girl? Flop, no, I can't think of anyone else. Just. Abel, just? Flop, I think you should try to say things in a way that makes people like you better, Village Chief Kuen. Even when you call out to them, things'll go much more smoothly if you're conscious of being friendly. Abel raised one eyebrow in response to the incredibly direct cheerful protest in front of him. The statement that Flop had made was a dignified one, but it was quite a harrowing statement to listen to from the bylines in frankness. Naturally, to have Rem referred to in a way that reduced her to just her capabilities did not sit well with Subaru. Al, that impression does not sound very convincing after those disrespectful words from just now, bro. Subaru, considering how far we've come, I got the right to say that much. Flop-san does too, then, right? Al, dunno, but I'm dying to hear about your adventures, bro. It was too turbulent a story to tell, but that was a topic to be delved into some other time. Regardless of how Abel had put it, Rem's safety was Subaru's top priority. Of course, he had confirmed with his own eyes that she held no noticeable trauma. Subaru, did she do anything like work too hard and collapse? Flop, don't worry about that, husband Kuen. Of course, all that hard work's taken its toll on her, but it's nothing that can't be remedied with some rest. It's really wonderful that you have the hard-working wife-san by your side. Subaru, I see, well, that's good. Stroking his chest in relief, Subaru was glad to hear Flop's guarantee. The situation was what it was. Even though he had to rely on Rem, he was frankly afraid that she would try too hard. What Subaru said mattered not, were it within her capabilities, Rem would not listen to him. Al, wife-san. Al muttered quietly beside Subaru, who had patted his chest in relief. He put a hand to the chin of his steel helmet, and cocked his head, puzzled. Al, I don't think I saw her up above, but did the girl from Bro's group come here too? Subaru, the girl from my group, you mean Amelia-tan? No, she didn't come here. How reassuring it would be to have her here. On the other hand, I don't think I would want her to be here. Amelia's gentle nature and the Valachian Empire's way of being were probably like water and oil. Although there was also a chance that Amelia, who tended to be someone who acted before thinking, would find the imperial approach more comfortable, the cruelty of the Empire itself went much further than that. Amelia was not suited for the Empire. Al, a wife other than your girl, huh? Subaru, just to tell you, we're passing it off as a matter of convenience. To tell you the truth, she's a girl I've decided to treat with that much care. I'll bring her home, no matter what. Al. Subaru explained to Al, who mumbled in a low tone with his hand on his chin. As long as they were also in the Empire, it was impossible for strange rumors to spread from Al's mouth, but he did not want Al to get the wrong idea. He did not want his resolve to get rained on. Priscilla, the delicate-looking man, the one they call merchant. Are you one of Abel's subordinates? Flop, no, I'm not his subordinate. My sister and I are in a position of cooperating with husband Kuen and village chief Kuen. Well, I guess it's appropriate to call him my newest friend. Priscilla, oh, a friend, huh? Priscilla, exchanging words with Flop, loosened her lips at his answer. Hiding her loosened lips with her fan, Priscilla sent a meaningful look in Abel's direction. Priscilla, I did not know you were hard at work making friends. It seems the throne of the Emperor of Wallachia has become such that it can easily be vacated. Abel, cease the sarcasm. I do not recall being friends with that man. Flop, what are you talking about, village chief Kuan? We've gone through the verge of death together in women's clothing. Abel, if you give death the slip alongside someone, you become friends immediately? If that is the case, then every single Imperial soldier is my friend. And the one who has been on the verge of death closest to me is my enemy. The perfect rebuttal, making use of his own position, made Flop hold his tongue upon receiving it. However, it was a double-edged sword that did not leave Abel unscathed either. Subaru, anyway, Flop-san brought us some good news. I'd like to talk about some more good news as well. Abel, wait. Subaru, what is it? It was an optimistic subject in a not-so-positive meeting. Interrupting Subaru's attempt to spur him on, Abel cocked his chin at Flop. Subaru's gaze was guided by that movement, and he also looked over at Flop. Subaru, Flop-san? Indeed, the reason why Abel pointed at him was because he had noticed the change in Flop's facial expression. Flop had not lost his bright, cheerful expression, yet in his eyes, which had always carried a cheerfulness as dazzling as the sun, there was a faint hint of hesitation and melancholy. Abel, if you are a merchant, you should be careful about how you talk about things. In that respect, I do not believe you are cut out to be a merchant. Flop, I've received quite a few of those opinions, so I have some thoughts on that matter, but I'll leave it at that for now. Husband Kuan, there was something I forgot to mention earlier. Subaru. Giving a sidelong glance towards Abel and his remark, Flop fluttered his eyelashes in melancholy, then directing his eyes at Subaru. His well-groomed face, and the wistfulness in it, made Subaru's heart tighten. He could not help but think that he did not want to hear what Flop had to say, but he had no choice but to listen. In that sense, Flop had a natural talent for making others listen to what he had to say. Were it not for this situation, Subaru would have praised him for his talent as a merchant. Despite that, however, Flop, it's not unrelated to Village Chief Kuan either. I want Miss Kuna and Miss Holly to come with us as well. Now that he was unable to stop Flop from telling him, he hated it, as if it were a cursed talent. Abel and Natsuki have come too, huh? After being called by Flop, Subaru and the others left the conference hall and went to the upper floor of the city hall. In the space that looked like a field hospital, where the wounded had been gathered, the one who greeted Subaru and the others was Mazelda, who had cut off her scorched black hair. The party that had stormed Geralt had been caught unprepared by Arakia's surprise attack, yet Mazelda had been the one to receive the most grievous injuries, having been overwhelmed by the flames in the first instance, and then by the blows exchanged with Arakia at the end. After having had her whole body scorched and then swallowed by the tornado, Arakia's blow clawed deep into her insides afterwards. No matter how tough her body was, it was unmistakably a situation that tested Mazelda's vitality, as if to see how far she could go with Rem's healing arts, which could not be said to be at their best. Mazelda, I'm sorry to call you here. I just thought I needed to tell you as soon as possible. Subaru, Mazelda-san. Mazelda smiled thinly as she said this, having taken a seat on an object near the wall. As one of the most powerful Amazonesses, Mazelda's smile was devoid of the wild demeanor that she had displayed towards Subaru and the others on numerous occasions. However, the willpower in her eyes was yet to be lost. It was unbalanced. Mazelda, first of all, thank you. Thanks to Rem, I'm alive. It's a miracle. Subaru. Mazelda, you took the city as well. As Shudrak's chieftain, I'm impressed with your work. In addition, I must make a declaration for the future of this war. Praising Rem's dedication and Subaru's contribution, Mazelda straightened her posture. And then, Mazelda, the position of chieftain of the Shudrak will be given to my sister, Tarita. I can't fulfill my duties anymore. She patted her right leg, which was missing from the knee down, and announced that her sister would take over the role. Chapter 30, Self-Proclaimed Hero Natsuki Subaru. Mazelda's expression was resolute as she declared that she would give up her position as chieftain. The dominance of her wild, strong-eyed beauty had not diminished, and she was still exactly the same as when they had first seen her. Through thick and thin, the impression of her being a strong woman remained the same. And with that notion still present, having lost her right leg, Mazelda had decided to step down from her position as chieftain. Everyone, the ones surrounding Mazelda, were the ones who harbored a deep sense of regret. The people of Shudrak, those who had witnessed Mazelda's, their chieftain's, strength from up close, would not be able to discard their bitterness and sense of loss that easily. Kuna's lack of expression was intensified by her usual coldness, next to Holly, whose usual relaxed state was replaced with a somber expression. A teary-eyed Utakata bit her lip and cast her head down, while all the remaining Shadrakians too displayed gloomy expressions on their faces. However, the one most shaken up amidst them all. Tarita, oh, sister, it's impossible. There's no way someone like me could be a good chieftain. Mazelda, Tarita. Tarita, it's because it's you, sister, that you were able to do it. I don't have the ability to do something like that. Shaking her head in disagreement, Tarita frantically pleaded. That she, Mazelda's younger sister, who had personally been nominated to be the next chieftain, respected and practically worshipped her elder sister, was easy to imagine, based off of every single one her daily words and actions. For that reason precisely, Tarita was in denial, unable to accept the fact that Mazelda had lost her leg. She appeared even more upset than Mazelda herself was. Rem, it's because of my inadequacy. Tarita's grief-stricken plea was met by a weak, self-condemning voice. It came from the other end of the room, littered with injured bodies, from Rem, who was in a state of exhaustion, making use of her cane to stand. She was the sole existence at this place able to use healing magic. Making herself useful, Rem bustled left and right, going from person to person, endeavoring to save many of the injured. One could only guess from her blood-stained clothes, disheveled hair, and fatigued expression how draining it had been. Nevertheless, the person in question did not care, and even the appreciative words of Subaru at the beginning had been met with a simple "I'm fine" of dismissal. Even so, no one had the right to condemn Rem for her lack of strength. Without her, they would not have been able to attain a result devoid of fatalities from Arakia's attack. Everyone understood that much. Therefore, Mazelda, Rem, there's no need for you to be worried. I was lucky to get out of the battle with the Imperial General having only lost one of my legs. No, it's because I had your help. Rem, Mazelda-san, that may be true, but... Mazelda, I'm grateful to you. I have nothing more to say. Rem was blocked from speaking any further, as Mazelda repeated her gratitude. Louis, her long blonde hair in disarray, snuggled up beside the silent Rem. As the former gently picked at the hem of the latter's dress, Rem quietly lowered her gaze, placing her hand on Louis's shoulder. The remorse and helplessness that Rem was feeling was painfully obvious to Subaru. But the dark-haired handsome man stepped forward faster than Subaru could say anything. Abel, Mazelda, you have no intention to change your mind, do you? Abel's question as he stepped forward was met with a nod from Mazelda, who sat on an object. As she felt the surface of her amputated, bandaged leg with her fingers, she said. Mazelda, I have no intention to. The pact between the Shudrak and Emperor of Wallachia will be kept. From here on out though, you should ask Tarita, or rather, the chieftain. Abel. I understand. Mazelda, you have done a great service. Mazelda, MH. Mazelda had hardened her resolve to resign, and Abel showed his understanding to her answer while folding his arms. With that, Mazelda let out a small breath and showed a wide grin. With a faint smile, she glanced upward at Abel. Mazelda, if it's going to be that way, show me your smile. It's the duty of a good-looking man. Abel, Mazelda, good enough. Despite losing her leg only recently, Mazelda was still much too fierce. Even Abel, arrogant as he was, did not criticize her for her disrespect, and even smiled at her attitude. Above all, this was proof that the emperor, whose throne had been usurped, displayed his respect towards the female warrior who lived in the jungle. And then... Mazelda, listen up, my brethren. Mazelda's smiling face hardened, as she raised her head to speak in a loud voice. Hearing the fierce sound of her voice, the Shudrak all straightened their posture as to listen carefully. Mazelda, as I told you earlier, I am fulfilling my duty as chieftain. I now hand over the role of chieftain to my sister, Tarita. Everyone, obey Tarita from now on. Shadrakians. Mazelda, this is my last command as chieftain. Thank you for your ancestral vows and ancestral pride. Shadrakians, thank you. Mazelda concluded, and the Shadrakians seemed to be reciting something. He knew not of their customs or long-standing practices. But even Subaru, an outsider and a layman, could sense that it was a ritual of succession. It was short, informal, and a combination of practical and conceptual inheritance. In this place, the position of chieftain of the people of Shudrak had been inherited, going from Mazelda to Tarita. Tarita, sister. Mazelda, don't lower your head, chieftain. Your hesitation is our hesitation. Your faltering is our faltering. Your death leads to our death. Tarita. Approaching her, Mazelda encouraged the new chieftain, Tarita. The latter's expression was murky. That would not make Tarita feel any better at once. However, Tarita must have realized that clinging onto her would not change the situation. After a few moments of silence, Tarita nodded timidly and silently. Ms. Zelda. The complex emotions that flitted in Ms. Zelda's eyes as she saw this were something that went unnoticed by Tarita as she lowered her head. And it was something that no one but her would mention. Subaru, to be honest, that was unexpected. With the chieftain's succession spiel and the damage report concluded, Subaru called out to Abel. Abel furrowed his brow at being stopped without receiving a concrete subject. Showing displeasure, he then inquired about Subaru's true intention with a what was? Abel, I have much to ponder. You, of all people, should not be bothering me. Subaru, you sure are harsh like always. It's just that I was surprised. You accepted Ms. Zelda-san leaving the front lines so readily. Abel. Subaru, I thought you'd say that all she lost was one leg for sure. I thought you were going to tell her to work herself to death for you. Even though he thought it far too extreme, Subaru declared his honest feelings to Abel. This was the emperor who had appended the people of Shudrak to his troops for the sake of reclaiming the throne, and someone who had considered polluting the fortress city of Daryl with poison, if worst came to worst. Abel no, Vincent Valekia, was very much willing to do such things. Abel, nonsense. What in the world would be the meaning of being so forceful? However, Abel's response to Subaru, who had been prepared to hurl words of abuse and his true opinion, was calm and sober. In front of the disappointed Subaru, Abel looked at the Shadrakians conversing in the distance. Abel, well, I do not wish that my subordinates do any more than they are capable of. Even if I order them to do their utmost, it would be delusional to expect them to go any further than their limits. Subaru. Abel, if they overperform in comparison to what they had been evaluated as being capable of, the plan shall be thrown into disarray. I simply request nothing more and nothing less than what I demand from my men. And Ms. Zelda has fulfilled her duty. In that case, the only thing I can present her with is a reward. With words, motivate them. With rewards, get them to exceed their abilities. With praise, make them promise to improve next time. Subaru had always thought, with absolute certainty, that this was how powerful people subjugated their subordinates. Therefore, Abel's reply was in direct contradiction to what Subaru had in mind. He would not request labors beyond the capabilities of his subordinates. It seemed like a good environment for subordinates to work in, albeit simultaneously a lonely one as well. Abel, goes without saying that endeavoring less than what is expected shall be met with punishment. Definite punishment or reward, you do comprehend what it signifies, right? Subaru, then, does that mean I'm going to be punished? Abel, if you were my subordinate, that would be correct. But are you my subordinate? Staring straight ahead, Subaru's eyes widened at Abel's words. Of course, Subaru did not recall ever becoming Abel's subordinate. In his discussion with Priscilla, Abel had treated Subaru as a military strategist, but he did not have any intention of formally becoming one. Subaru, it's not that I'm not attracted to the title of military strategist, but I don't wish to be something like your subordinate. Abel, and so that is how it is. You are not my subordinate, and therefore, you do not fall under the category of receiving definite punishment or reward. Subaru, thinking about it, just what are you to me? Because of their situation, they were forced to accompany each other. They did not have the relationship of a master and a servant in the first place, nor any kind of personal one. They were two people caught in a flow of obstacles, and once these obstacles were cleared, their paths would separate. That was the type of relationship they had. Calling them friends, or allies, or comrades, would just be untrue. If there was something they could be classified as, it would be cross-dressing companions. Abel, some have taken the liberty of calling me a friend, but you have not. Subaru, ah. I'm a shy guy, so I can't become your friend that easily. Given the current situation, the person who may have been able to call him a friend here would either be a very good person or a fraud, and Flop would be the former. Anyhow, Abel, I shall resume my conversation with Priscilla. Go do whatever else you need to do. Subaru, what I need to do. Abel, it should not be required of me to tell you that. Being diced by those almond-shaped eyes, Subaru's gaze left Abel and headed towards the corner of the room. There, he found the figure of Rem sitting on the floor. He could not make out her downcast expression from a distance, but there was no doubt that leaving her alone would not do. He was somewhat annoyed that Abel had told him to do it first, though. Subaru, I don't want you to get in trouble with Priscilla and start another fight. Just be careful with how you talk to her. Abel, I am certain many would advise that you, not I, should be the one to receive those words. Hateful words were reposted with further hateful words, and Subaru parted ways with Abel, who returned to the conference hall. Mazelda's leg would change the situation of the people of Shudrak, so it would be necessary to take that into account when engaging in discussions with Priscilla. However, there was little room for Subaru in the conversation between the celestial beings, Abel and Priscilla. The priority for Subaru was to speak to the only person he could. Subaru, Rem, is now a good time? He lightly took a deep breath and calmed himself down, before heading over, towards Rem. Sitting with her knees folded and her back against the wall, Rem slightly stirred at Subaru's words, his figure faintly reflected on her pale blue eyes. Rem, is that you? When are you going to change your clothes? Subaru, Rem has priority over changing clothes. As soon as this conversation ends, I will change my clothes. Rem, is that so? Well then, this conversation has ended. Please go change your clothes. Subaru, that's so crude. Subaru was left helpless and raised his voice after Rem's blunt retort. At Subaru's voice, Rem's eyes sharpened and she said, please be quiet. Then she jerked her chin toward the girl leaning on her left shoulder. Rem, at this rate, you'll wake up the sleeping Louis-John. Please consider her. Subaru, well, Rem, or is it just that you do not want to put that much consideration into this girl? Subaru, don't say it like that. My bad. Taking tiny breaths while sleeping, Louis cuddled closer with Rem. Louis had been helping Rem to treat the wounded, her white clothes were stained with blood here and there. From what he had learned from Rem's attitude and from Utakata, she had done exactly as she had been told, albeit poorly. Naturally, Subaru's inner thoughts were mixed, though. Rem, it throws me off when you make a grim face in that appearance. Subaru, oh, yeah, my bad. My makeup's messed up, it's rather unsightly. Rem, it looked unsightly even when you had it on properly. Subaru, ta-ho-ho. Subaru's shoulders slumped in depression at Rem's remark, which was as harsh as ever. Subaru then slowly sat side by side with Rem, at her right, opposite of Louis. He peeked at Rem's protesting gaze, but consciously ignored it. Subaru, Rem, you did great. Everyone survived thanks to you. Rem, I'm keenly aware of my lack of power. To tell you the truth, I'm useless. Subaru, Rem. In response to the words of gratitude, Rem looked down at her hands in frustration. As she regarded those pale fingers, Rem was biting her lip weakly. Subaru, you're definitely not useless. Even though your memories are fuzzy, you were able to use your healing magic splendidly and saved a lot of people. But Rem, I know. If I were whole, this magic wouldn't have been like this. Subaru, like this? Rem, my healing magic. The magic I'm using right now is by intuition, in other words, self-taught. Though with Louis-John's assistance, I've managed to get it into shape. Even then. Rem's words did not continue beyond that point. The reason why she did not continue after that was because it was something that went without saying. She knew that, if she put it into words, it would become a blade that she would hurt herself with, and that the pain would console her, albeit slightly. Complaints, when spoken, would hurt oneself and others. In compensation, however, it would lighten one's heart merely a little bit. And Rem disliked the idea of lightening her heart. It was proof that she truly blamed herself for her inability to save others, because of her lack of power. Subaru. Once again, Subaru painfully understood Rem's feelings. To rue that one could have done more was more painful than an unreachable wall. It would be even worse when it regarded someone else's future, someone other than one's own. The loss of Mazelda's leg had left something weighty in the recesses of Subaru's heart. It was not a life. But it was not hard to imagine the magnitude of losing one of your 4 limbs. The closest example was certainly Al, a one-armed man who had lost his left arm. Additionally, there was the Watergate city of Pristella. During that battle, Ricardo had lost one of his arms in a confrontation against gluttony. It had been an extremely shocking event, but it was not a tragedy so remote that it could not happen. In fact, for those who put themselves in harm's way, it may be more appropriate to call it a familiar tragedy. Still. Subaru, that's harsh. Rem, yes. Subaru's parched murmur was met with a small nod from Rem right beside him. This was the first time he had ever gotten a straightforward nod without repercussions, yet he was unfortunately not in the right frame of mind to appreciate it. Rem glanced at Subaru, the latter holding a lump deep in his chest. Rem, the previous. If it was the previous me, I wonder how it would have gone. Subaru, if it was the you when you still had memories? Rem, yes. If it was the past me's healing magic, Mazelda-san's leg could have been saved. Subaru closed his eyes at the words that would have followed. It was not that he could not comprehend what Rem was thinking. But it was difficult for Subaru, being on the outside, to judge the extent to which the presence or absence of memory had affected Rem's healing magic. Even if it were possible to quantify the healing power, it would be difficult for Subaru to assess it. However, REM, her pale blue eyes filled with earnest emotion, were directed at Subaru. If the answer she was looking for was something that Subaru could provide, he did not know, but there were only two choices in front of him: the previous REM could or the previous REM couldn't. Which of the two would turn out to be the salvation for REM? Or rather, which of the two would save REM from being hurt even more? Subaru, even with your memories, I think it would be helpless. REM. Subaru, even healing magic isn't all-powerful. In that case, REM would have done the best she could. He replied after a few seconds of agonizing thought, which felt much longer in Subaru's mind. Even if REM had her memories, even if her healing magic had been in perfect condition, she would not have been able to save Mazelda's leg. The truth was that it was not about ifs. If they started talking about ifs, there would be no end to it. It was true that REM had not been able to salvage Mazelda's leg. But beyond Mazelda, she had saved the lives of many other injured people. She should be praised for her achievements, and there was no reason for her to blame herself. In fact, if someone should be blamed, it should be Subaru. I wasn't strong enough. REM, Subaru, I didn't think enough. I should have examined things more seriously. Upon hearing this answer spat out by Subaru, REM's round eyes went wide. In front of REM, Subaru clenched his molars with force and covered his face with both of his hands. If anyone were to curse the lack of strength, the blame should fall on Subaru. Subaru, all of it. It's my fault. Despite the pompous claims of a bloodless siege, reality was far from such results. Arakia's intrusion had caused many injuries, and her recovery had brought death to multiple guards. There had been no casualties within their own ranks, but taking into account Mazelda's missing leg, how could it be called bloodless? He had failed. It was a pile of failures, and the chance for recovery had been lost. All he wanted was the best possible happy ending, and what Subaru had obtained was either a SOSO happy ending or what should be called a SOSO bad ending. To paraphrase Abel's words from earlier, definite punishment or reward castigation ought to follow. Had Subaru been one of Abel's men, it would not be strange for him to have his head chopped off. Worst case scenario, he would have to return by death. Thoughts like these crossed his mind. In that case, he would most likely go back to the most recent point of return, to the time of the bloody battle against Todd in Garrel. The fear caused by the recollection of that time made his entire body tremble. Still, even if he returned to that moment of terror, if he could recover what they had lost. REM, why? Suddenly, that word struck the brooding Subaru's eardrums. Raising his face immediately, he was met head-on by REM's eyes staring right toward him. REM's eyes, which had been moist with remorse until just before, were now staring straight at Subaru, holding even stronger remorse within. REM, why did it turn into your fault? Agitated by REM's gaze, more words were piled up upon Subaru, rendered unable to move. She extended her hand, her eyes damp, and while indicating the devastated city hall she said, REM, so Mazelda-san's leg, Louis-chan's and Utakata-chan's injuries, Medium-san's and Flop-san's wounds, all of it is your fault? Subaru, they are, yes. It wouldn't have turned out like this if I'd been more careful about my preparations. REM, you thought of a plan, and your seemingly reckless plan had a proper payoff. You were able to hold the general second class in place, and get them into the city without letting anyone fight. Just like we planned. Subaru, but then after that. REM, who cares about what happened after? At Subaru's persistence, REM raised her eyebrows and made her voice louder. REM quickly turned her face, and because of this, Louis, who was leaning against her, fell into her lap. Louis jerked slightly and groaned softly, without waking up. While supporting Louis's shoulder, REM puffed slightly and looked at Subaru again. REM, no one could have foreseen what would happen after that. The appearance of that half-naked woman and her rampage were all unpredictable. So, Subaru. REM, so why are you responsible for all of that? Subaru gulped as the question of why was once again asked toward him. If you asked him why, he would think it was the responsibility of one that had power. In the same way that REM lamented the lack of power in her own healing magic, Subaru sometimes regretted and lamented the fact that his own authority could not make up for it. The scope of return by death was greater. The future could improve or worsen, depending on whether Subaru exercised his power. However, Subaru, it was a truth that could not be told to another, even if the person was REM. It was not restricted to merely REM. The authority Subaru wielded, this alone he could not propagate to anyone, no matter how open-minded the other party was. No, he was unable to speak of it even to someone he had established an emotional bond with. If he told them, there was no way he could disclose the truth without possibly causing the death of that person. He was afraid of pain. The pain brought about from trying to tell someone about return by death was terrifying. Who could get used to that intense pain that gripped one's heart no matter how many times they experienced it? But what was truly frightening was not the pain, but the loss. Was there anything in this world that was more terrifying than loss? Was it not because of this extreme fear precisely that this authority had been granted to Natsuki Subaru? Rem, why did you protect me? Subaru, ha? Rem continued to speak as if she had given up on Subaru, the latter silent and unable to answer. For a moment, Subaru blinked, unsure of what she was talking about. Rem, when that half-naked woman attacked me. I knocked down a pillar, and when that didn't work, that woman came at me, and you stood in front of me. In a selfless attempt to save her from being attacked by Arakia, Subaru had stood in front of Rem. His hands outstretched, he had been desperate to keep any threat away from Rem. At that moment, Subaru did not care if Arakia were to take his life. He wanted Rem to outlive him, for even a second longer. That was Rem, the result of your bloodless siege, the fact that you covered for me at that moment, and even the fact that Mazelda-san lost her leg. You're trying to take on everything on your own. Subaru. Rem, you're not strong enough to do all those things. At first, I was wary of you because of that horrible smell. That was where Rem broke off her words, and once she did, she looked down at Louis on her lap. Gently stroking her golden hair, Rem choked and calmly turned her gaze back to Subaru, saying, Rem, I, Louis-chan, Abel-san, Mazelda-san and the others, Medium-san and Flop-san are all human beings with a will, and you don't have to get worked up to protect them. Subaru, oh. Rem, please don't try to do anything like that all by yourself. You don't have to take responsibility for our actions. Subaru's mouth opened and closed repeatedly, overwhelmed by the shower of words. His brain refused to comprehend what was being said, in a prompt fashion. However, an unidentified sense of urgency scorched Subaru's heart, forcing him to listen no further. With earnest emotion, directed at a Subaru cursing his own lack of power, Rem bit back. He had to stop her from saying anything beyond that. Rem, you aren't a special person. He knew he should not have allowed her to say it. Rem, because you're not a hero. Staggering, Subaru walked through the city hall as if wandering. He had no destination in mind. It was not even clear when he had started walking, to begin with. When he had come to, he was walking, and if anything, his consciousness still remained in a state of vagueness. Subaru, hook. Suddenly, he was hit head-on by a hard impact. Taking a look at it, it seemed that he had hit a wall. He was walking while only staring at his feet, that was the reason. Slamming his forehead against the bare wall, Subaru held his aching forehead and exhaled. Then, without thinking, he slammed his forehead against the solid wall again. A firm impact and a dull sound, and Subaru felt a stinging pain in his brain. As he shook his brain from the outside, he felt as if the stagnation that permeated his whole body was slowly receding. In the same manner, Subaru slammed his forehead against the wall again and again. Slam, slam, slam. Hey, stop that, bro. As he pulled back to strike again, his shoulder was grabbed from behind. He had been called out. What came into view when Subaru turned around was a gaze that met his own from behind a steel helmet directed his way. Still grasping Subaru by the shoulder, the other party cracked the bones in his own neck and spoke. Al, I understand the feeling of wanting to die. But no matter how many times you do that, there's gonna be no end to that sort of thing. End of chapters 29 and 30, to each their stance.